I'm Caitlin Parker, 34, and until last month, I was the marketing executive at Parker Family Enterprises, the company my father built. The tension with my mother Eleanor and brother James had been building for months over my ideas for digital expansion. After a weekend getaway to clear my head, I returned to find a crisp, white envelope on my desk. Inside was a letter that made my stomach drop. "You're out of the family business. Expect a call from our lawyer." They'd forgotten one crucial detail. I owned 40% of the company. Before I continue with what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you want more stories like this. And follow along as I reveal how I turned my family's betrayal into the best decision of my life. Parker Family Enterprises wasn't just a company to me, it was my heritage, my future, and the physical manifestation of my father's dreams. Dad started the marketing agency in our basement with nothing but a second-hand desk, a rotary phone, and an unshakable belief that authentic storytelling could transform businesses. I was only 7 when he landed his first major client, and I still remember him scooping me up in his arms, his eyes bright with triumph, saying, "Katie, one day all of this will be part of your legacy too." While other kids spent weekends at the mall, I shadowed my father at client meetings. By 12, I could recite our company values in my sleep. By 16, I was developing small campaign concepts that occasionally made it into actual pitches. My father never treated my ideas as childish or trivial. He'd furrow his brow, considering each suggestion with the same serious attention he gave to his senior staff. "You've got the Parker instinct," he'd say, tapping his temple with a wink. "Marketing isn't just in our name, it's in our blood." James, my brother, 3 years older, never shared that connection with Dad. While I was voluntarily staying late to absorb everything I could about the business, James was being coaxed and bribed to show the slightest interest. It wasn't that my father didn't try with him, he did, desperately at times, but James viewed the family business as an obligation rather than an opportunity. "Dad always lights up when you walk into a room," James once said to me during a rare vulnerable moment after a particularly difficult client presentation. "He looks at me and sees all the ways I'm not you." I tried to reassure him, but the truth was evident in the way my father would unconsciously turn to me first for input. The way he'd mention my name in conversations about the company's future. The seed of resentment planted in childhood grew quietly over the years, watered by each of my achievements and my father's unintentional favoritism. After graduating with my MBA from Northwestern, I formally joined the company as a junior marketing strategist, insisting on starting from the bottom despite my father's offer of a director position. I wanted to earn my place, to know every aspect of the business intimately. Within 3 years, I had brought in 7 major clients, expanded our service offerings to include social media management, and helped increase our annual revenue by 32%. James, meanwhile, had settled into operations management, a critical role, but one that kept him behind the scenes. He was good at it, ensuring the business ran smoothly. But the creative vision and client relationships had always been my father's domain, and increasingly, mine. 5 years ago, my world collapsed when Dad had a sudden heart attack at his desk. I was the one who found him, who rode in the ambulance clutching his cold hand, who heard his final whispered instruction: "Take care of the company, Katie. It's your turn to lead." The will reading a week later sent shockwaves through our grieving family. Dad had left 40% of the company to me, 30% to my mother, and 30% to James. My father's lawyer explained that the distribution reflected Dad's belief in my vision for the company's future, while still ensuring all family members had significant input. The look on James's face, a mixture of betrayal and vindication, as if his worst suspicions about our father's preferences had been confirmed, haunts me still. Mother, still numb with grief, had simply nodded, seemingly unsurprised by the arrangement. In the months following Dad's death, Mom relied heavily on James. They had always been close, but grief seemed to cement their alliance. As I threw myself into work, pushing through my own pain by honoring Dad's legacy through business growth, they turned inward, clinging to tradition and resisting change. The first major conflict emerged when I proposed investing in a digital transformation initiative. The marketing landscape was evolving rapidly, and I saw tremendous opportunity in expanding our online presence and capabilities. The proposal required significant capital investment, but promised to double our client capacity within 2 years. Your father built this company on personal relationships and face-to-face meetings, Mom said during the board meeting, her voice carrying a hint of accusation. Not through computer screens and internet gimmicks. We've always been a traditional agency, James added. Our clients value our hands-on approach. This digital push could alienate our core customer base. I presented data, case studies, and projections, but their minds were made up. The proposal was shelved. The first of many similar rejections. Each time, the divide between us grew wider. Despite these setbacks, I managed to implement smaller changes. I started a company blog that gained industry recognition, built relationships with digital influencers, and secured our first e-commerce client who came with a contract worth more than our 3 largest traditional clients combined. Last month, I landed Horizons Healthcare, a national hospital network looking to revamp their entire brand identity. The account would potentially double our company's value and require us to hire at least 15 new employees. During the pitch meeting, with Horizon's entire executive team present, James interrupted my presentation to suggest we scale back the digital components of the proposed campaign. What my sister fails to recognize, he said with a tight smile, is that healthcare consumers, particularly those in older demographics, respond better to traditional media. We should focus on print and television rather than these elaborate social media strategies. I maintained my composure, but the undermining was unmistakable. Surprisingly, the Horizons team sided with my vision, specifically citing our digital capabilities as what set us apart from competitors. We signed the contract the following day. That evening, I overheard James in my mother's office, his voice rising with frustration. She's going to transform Dad's company into something unrecognizable, he was saying. Every new client pulls us further away from his vision. Something needs to be done, Mom, before it's too late. I didn't hear my mother's response, but the conversation left me unsettled enough that I decided to take a weekend trip to our family lake house, Dad's favorite place to think through big decisions. I spent 3 days hiking, swimming, and reflecting on my father's legacy and my place within it. By Sunday evening, I felt centered and recommitted to finding a way to honor both tradition and innovation. I returned to the office early Monday morning, feeling optimistic about finding common ground with my family. That's when I saw the envelope. The crisp white envelope sat centered on my keyboard, my name typed rather than handwritten. No family member had ever communicated with me so formally before. A sense of foreboding washed over me as I slid my finger under the seal. The letterhead bore our company logo, the one my father had designed himself 25 years ago. Below it, in stark black text, the message began. Dear Caitlin, after careful consideration and consultation with the company board, we have made the difficult decision to relieve you of your duties at Parker Family Enterprises, effective immediately. Your recent actions have demonstrated a persistent pattern of undermining our family values and disrespecting the traditional methodologies that have been the cornerstone of our success. Your insistence on dramatic organizational changes without proper consideration for established client relationships and company culture can no longer be tolerated. Our legal team is preparing documentation regarding the purchase of your shares at fair market value. You will be contacted by Attorney Wilson Marshall within the week to begin this process. Please clear your personal belongings from your office by end of day. IT has already transitioned your email and system access to ensure a smooth continuation of business operations. Sincerely, Eleanor Parker, CEO, Parker Family Enterprises. The letter trembled in my hands as I read it a second time, then a third, hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into something less devastating. My mother hadn't even signed it personally, just her typed name and title, as if I were any other employee being terminated. I sank into my chair, my breath coming in short, painful gasps. Tears blurred my vision as the reality set in. My own family had conspired behind my back to push me out of the company I'd helped build, the company my father had explicitly entrusted to my care. Take care of the company, Katie. My father's dying words echoed in my mind. I had promised him I would, had held his hand and sworn to protect and grow his legacy. Now, not even 5 years later, I was being forced out by the very people who should have been my strongest allies. I reached for my phone to call my mother, my fingers shaking so badly I could barely dial. The call went straight to voicemail, not her personal greeting, but the generic automated message. She was deliberately avoiding me. My second call was to the main reception desk. Good morning, Katie. Brenda's cheerful voice answered. You're in early today. Brenda, is my mother in the office? She and James are in a meeting with the department heads. They asked not to be disturbed. Is everything okay? Your voice sounds strange. Everything's fine, I lied. When did this meeting get scheduled? Last Friday afternoon. Very last minute. Something about organizational restructuring. Friday. While I was at the lake house. They had planned this the moment I was out of sight. I thanked Brenda and hung up. Then tried to log into my computer. Access denied. My email credentials had already been revoked. Moving like a sleepwalker, I opened my desk drawers to find them already partially emptied. My personal items neatly boxed up and stacked beside the credenza. My phone buzzed with an incoming email from Wilson Marshall, our company lawyer. No, their company lawyer now. Caitlin. I've been instructed to inform you that your employment with Parker Family Enterprises has been terminated. Please find attached the preliminary documentation regarding the company's intent to purchase your shares. As part of the separation process, all company property, including your laptop, phone, and building access card, must be returned to HR by 5 p.m. today. While I understand this is a difficult situation, I strongly advise against any actions that could be viewed as obstruction or retaliation. Such behavior would only complicate the transition. Wilson Marshall, ESQ. Obstruction? Retaliation? They were treating me like a disgruntled employee who might steal clients or sabotage projects. Me, who had poured my heart and soul into this company since before I was old enough to drive. I sat frozen, trying to process this betrayal, when a gentle knock interrupted my thoughts. Sarah Reed, our head accountant, and my friend since college, slipped into my office and closed the door behind her. I just heard, she whispered, her expression a mixture of shock and sympathy. Katie, I'm so sorry. This is insane. Did you know this was coming? I asked, unable to keep the accusation from my voice. Sarah shook her head vehemently. No, I swear. But she hesitated, glancing nervously at the door. But what, Sarah? James asked me to prepare a valuation report for your shares last week. He specifically instructed me to focus on the most conservative metrics and to exclude the Horizons contract from the calculations since it hasn't been fully implemented yet. My stomach clenched. He's trying to undervalue my shares. Sarah nodded grimly. The number he wants to offer you is about 40% below what I'd consider fair market value, especially considering the Horizons deal you just landed. Can he do that? Legally? It's a gray area. Ethically? Absolutely not. But Katie, she lowered her voice further. This isn't just about money. James has been meeting with clients, your clients, for weeks, telling them you're taking a step back from account management. He's been laying groundwork. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't a sudden decision sparked by the Horizons contract. This was calculated. Planned for months while I worked tirelessly to grow the very company they were now stealing from me. How could my mother agree to this? I whispered, more to myself than to Sarah. James has been in her ear constantly since your father died. You've been so focused on the business that you maybe haven't noticed how influential he's become. Eleanor relies on him for everything now. I thought of all the family dinners I'd missed for client meetings. The weekends I'd spent at the office while James took Mom to her medical appointments and helped with household repairs. I'd been so determined to honor my promise to Dad that I'd failed to protect my relationship with the rest of my family. After Sarah left, I sat motionless, staring at the framed photo on my desk, my father and me at the company's 20th anniversary celebration, both of us beaming with pride. A wave of grief and betrayal washed over me so intensely that for a moment, I couldn't breathe. "I'm sorry, Dad," I whispered to his smiling image. "I failed you." As I placed the photo in the box of my belongings, something shifted inside me. The initial shock and hurt began to crystallize into something harder, more resolute. They wanted me gone? Fine. But if they thought I would slink away quietly while they devalued everything I'd built, everything my father had entrusted to me, they were about to learn how mistaken they were. I pulled out a notepad and began to write. The first rule of war is to never let your enemy know you're fighting. As I carefully placed my father's photograph on top of my personal belongings, I made a decision. I would appear to accept their terms while secretly preparing my counterattack. My response to my mother's letter was a single word, written in the same formal tone they had used with me. Understood. That evening, I contacted Melissa Wagner, a business attorney specializing in family-owned companies and shareholder disputes. Unlike Wilson Marshall, who had known my family for decades and clearly taken sides, Melissa had no emotional attachment to the situation. Her office scheduled me for a 7 a.m. appointment the next day. "They've made several critical mistakes," Melissa said after reviewing my documents and the termination letter. "First, while they can terminate your employment, they cannot force you to sell your shares. You're a 40% owner regardless of whether you work there or not. But they've already started the process to buy me out," I said. "They can start whatever they want, but unless your father set up specific buy-sell provisions that I'm not seeing here, you have no legal obligation to sell." Second mistake. By removing you without proper board procedure, they've potentially violated corporate governance requirements. "What about the share valuation?" I asked, thinking of Sarah's warning. "That's their third mistake. They're trying to set the price, but as a significant shareholder, you have the right to demand a fair and independent valuation." A plan began forming in my mind. What if I don't want to sell to them at all? What if I found another buyer? Melissa's expression shifted to one of cautious interest. The company bylaws would determine if there are any restrictions on transferring shares to outside parties. "Do you have a copy?" I did. Dad had insisted I understand every aspect of the company's legal structure. I pulled the document from my briefcase and handed it to her. Melissa spent several minutes scanning the text, occasionally making notes. Finally, she looked up with the ghost of a smile. "There's a standard right of first refusal clause, meaning the company has the right to match any offer you receive from an outside party. But there's nothing prohibiting you from finding an external buyer and setting the price that way." She leaned forward. "Do you have someone in mind?" I did, actually. Michael Reynolds, CEO of Apex Marketing, had approached me at an industry conference 6 months ago, hinting at potential acquisition interest. I had politely deflected at the time, loyal to our family legacy. Now, that conversation took on new significance. "I need to verify the true value of my shares first," I told Melissa. "Can you recommend an independent business valuator?" By that afternoon, I was sitting across from Jonathan Price, a certified business appraiser with 20 years of experience in marketing agency valuations. "Based on the financial documents you've provided, particularly with this New Horizons healthcare contract, I'd value the company at approximately $22 million, Jonathan said after a thorough review. "That makes your 40% stake worth about $8. $8 million. The figure took my breath away. Dad had built something truly substantial, and with my help over the past 5 years, it had more than tripled in value. According to Sarah, James was planning to offer me around $3.5 million, less than half of what my shares were actually worth. That evening, I made a call to Michael Reynolds at Apex Marketing. Caitlin Parker. He answered warmly. I was just thinking about your social campaign for Central Bank. Brilliant work. Thank you, Michael. I'm calling because circumstances have changed at Parker Family Enterprises. I'm exploring options regarding my 40% ownership stake. There was a brief pause. I see. Would you be open to dinner tomorrow to discuss this further? The meeting with Michael exceeded my expectations. Apex wasn't just interested. They were eager to expand into our market sector and viewed acquiring my shares as a perfect entry point. We've admired your digital innovation from afar, Michael admitted. Your company's traditional foundation combined with your forward-thinking strategies created a unique value proposition. To be candid, we've been hoping for an opportunity like this. After reviewing my independent valuation, Michael made an offer, $9.2 million for my 40% stake, $400,000 above the appraised value. The premium, he explained, was for the strategic advantage of gaining immediate access to the healthcare marketing sector through the Horizons contract, the very contract James had tried to undermine. While Michael prepared the formal offer, I began gathering documentation of my contributions to the company, client testimonials, campaign metrics, revenue growth figures, awards we'd won for my initiatives. If James and my mother tried to dispute the valuation or block the sale, I would be prepared to demonstrate exactly how much value I had created. I also began quietly meeting with the clients I had personally brought to the firm. Without revealing the full situation, I updated them on my changing role and assured them of my commitment to their success, regardless of my position. The subtext was clear to anyone paying attention. My loyalty was to them, not necessarily to Parker Family Enterprises. Meanwhile, I maintained the appearance of compliance. I cleared out my office as instructed, turned in my company property, and responded courteously but minimally to communications from Wilson Marshall regarding the proposed buyout. MS. Parker has requested additional time to review the financial details before proceeding with any share transfer discussions, my attorney informed him. Each night, I returned home to my apartment and methodically worked through my strategy, often until dawn broke over the city's skyline. The lack of sleep barely registered. I was operating on a combustible mixture of determination and controlled fury. A week after my termination, I found a small box outside my apartment door. Inside was my father's custom Mont Blanc pen, the one he had used to sign every major contract in the company's history. He had left it to me specifically in his will, but somehow it had remained in his old office, now occupied by James. There was no note, no explanation for its return now. I held the pen, feeling its familiar weight, remembering how Dad would uncap it with a flourish before signing his name with a confident stroke. This pen had been present at every significant milestone in our company's journey, and now it would sign one more crucial document. The ache of betrayal was still raw, but as I placed the pen on top of the Apex offer letter awaiting my signature, I felt something else growing stronger, a steely resolve. My father had built Parker Family Enterprises on integrity, innovation, and respect for all contributors. My mother and brother had abandoned those principles when they plotted behind my back, devalued my contributions, and attempted to cheat me of my rightful stake. Dad would never have approved of their actions, and he would have expected me to stand up for myself. They think I'm the problem, I whispered to his photograph beside my bed. They're about to discover they were wrong. The morning I signed the agreement with Apex Marketing dawned crisp and clear. The kind of perfect autumn day my father would have called a good omen. I dressed with particular care, a charcoal suit he had always complimented, his favorite sapphire earrings he'd given me for my 30th birthday, and a quiet confidence that came from knowing I was taking control of my own destiny. Michael Reynolds and his legal team met me at Melissa's office downtown, far from the Parker Family Enterprises headquarters where I might be seen. The conference room held a certain gravitas, all polished wood and leather chairs, appropriate for the weight of what we were about to do. "Before we proceed," Michael said, sliding the final contract across the table, "I want to confirm that this is absolutely what you want, Caitlin. Once executed, there's no going back." I appreciated his caution. This wasn't just a business transaction, it was the severing of a lifelong connection to my family's legacy. "I'm certain," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "My father built this company to create something meaningful, not to be used as a weapon in family power struggles. I believe this decision honors his true legacy better than staying in a toxic situation would." I uncapped my father's Mont Blanc pen and signed my name on the designated lines, all 37 of them. With each signature, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Grief for what should have been, relief at escaping the betrayal, anxiety about the future, and, beneath it all, a current of excitement about new possibilities. When the last page was signed, notarized, and copied, Michael shook my hand firmly. "Welcome to the Apex family, Caitlin. We'll make the official announcement tomorrow morning." As I left the building, my phone buzzed with a notification from my bank. The wire transfer of $9.2 million had been completed. I stood motionless on the sidewalk, staring at the screen. The amount was staggering, life-changing, but in that moment, it felt hollow. Money couldn't replace what I had lost, my position in the company my father built, the daily connection to his memory, the sense of continuing his work. For a brief, terrifying moment, doubt crashed over me like a wave. Had I acted too hastily? Should I have fought harder from within? Would Dad be disappointed in my decision to sell to a competitor? I found myself wandering toward the river, to a bench where Dad and I had often eaten lunch together when I was in college. Sitting there now, watching the water flow, I pulled out an old photograph from my wallet, Dad teaching me to fish at the lake house when I was 7. Both of us laughing as I held up a tiny sunfish, like it was a trophy marlin. What struck me now, looking at the image, was the pride in his eyes, not pride in the fish or even in my accomplishment, but pride in me, his daughter. Dad had loved the company, yes, but he had loved his family more. Or at least, he had tried to. I remembered a conversation we'd had shortly before his death. I had been working late, again, canceling plans with friends to finish a client proposal. "The company will always need more from you, Katie," he'd said, surprising me by turning off my computer monitor. "The trick is knowing when to say enough for today. Don't make the same mistakes I did." I hadn't fully understood his meaning then. Now, looking at the photograph, at his laugh lines and the gray hair he'd earned from decades of stress, I wondered if selling my shares wasn't just an escape from betrayal, but also a liberation from a cycle my father himself had recognized as problematic. My phone buzzed again, a text from Sarah. "James just scheduled an emergency financial review for tomorrow morning. He doesn't know yet, does he?" "No," I texted back. "The announcement goes out at 9 a.m. My resolve strengthened. James and my mother had made their choice when they plotted my removal. Now I had made mine. That evening, I returned to the Parker Family Enterprises building after hours. Using the master key Dad had given me years ago, the one thing they'd forgotten to ask for in their termination process. The offices were dark and silent, the familiar scent of coffee and printer toner oddly comforting as I made my way to my father's old office, now James's domain. I wasn't there to sabotage or to steal. I simply needed closure. A final goodbye to the space that had shaped so much of my life. On James's desk, Dad's antique mahogany desk, I placed my building key and a single sheet of paper with the words, "I understand now," written in my father's Mont Blanc ink. Next, I visited my mother's office. Her space was as immaculate as always, family photos arranged precisely on her credenza. I noticed with a pang that a recent picture of me had been removed, leaving a conspicuous gap between frames of James and his wife. On her desk, I left the pen, a piece of Parker history that deserved to stay with the company. Beside it, I placed the photograph of Dad and me fishing. She would understand its significance. It had always been her favorite image of us. My final stop was my own former office, now stripped of personal touches. In the empty space, memories flooded back, late nights brainstorming with the creative team, celebrations over won accounts, quiet moments of satisfaction when a campaign succeeded beyond expectations. I had grown up in this building, evolved from an eager child to a confident professional within these walls. Goodbye, I whispered to the empty room, allowing myself one moment of sentimentality before straightening my shoulders and walking out for the last time. Back at my apartment, I drafted emails to the clients I had personally brought to the firm, not poaching them, which would violate standard non-solicitation agreements, but simply informing them of my departure and expressing gratitude for our professional relationship. I was careful with my wording, but the message between the lines was clear. This wasn't my choice, and my door would remain open. At precisely 8:55 the next morning, I received a text from Michael. Press release going out in 5 minutes. Ready? Ready, I replied, my finger hovering over the send button on my pre-written client emails. At 9 a.m., 3 things happened simultaneously. Apex Marketing issued a press release announcing their acquisition of a 40% stake in Parker Family Enterprises. My emails went out to 14 major clients, and my phone began ringing with a call from my brother. I let it go to voicemail. The die was cast. My shares were sold. And in business, as my father always said, timing is everything. The industry news alert hit inboxes at 9:03 a.m. Apex Marketing acquires significant stake in Parker Family Enterprises. The article detailed how Apex, a digital-first agency known for its innovative approaches, had purchased a 40% ownership position from former executive Caitlin Parker for an undisclosed sum rumored to be in the 8-figure range. By 9:07, my phone had accumulated 6 missed calls from James, 3 from my mother, and 1 from Wilson Marshall. My email inbox was flooding with messages from industry colleagues, former coworkers, and journalists seeking comment. At 9:12, my brother left his first voicemail, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. Katie, what have you done? Call me back immediately. This has to be some kind of mistake. You can't sell to Apex. They're our direct competitor. Call me back right now. I didn't. Instead, I watched from my apartment as the digital marketing world exploded with speculation. LinkedIn notifications poured in as connections shared and commented on the news. Industry forums buzzed with discussion about what this meant for both companies' futures. Apex's stock jumped 3.8% in the first hour of trading. At 9:45, Michael Reynolds released a follow-up statement. We at Apex Marketing are thrilled to announce this strategic acquisition. Parker Family Enterprises has built an impressive legacy in traditional marketing, while our strengths lie in digital innovation. This partnership represents the perfect marriage of established expertise and forward-thinking approaches. We look forward to working closely with the Parker leadership to usher in an exciting new chapter for both organizations. The carefully worded statement conveyed the subtext clearly to anyone in the industry. Apex had just gained significant influence over a traditional competitor and planned to modernize their operations, exactly what I had been pushing for before my ousting. By 10:30, James had escalated from phone calls to text messages. You need to undo this immediately. This is a betrayal of everything Dad built. Mom is devastated. How could you do this to your own family? Wilson says there must be a way to invalidate the sale. Was this your plan all along? That last message made me laugh out loud, a sharp, bitter sound in my quiet apartment. Was this my plan all along? The irony was almost too perfect. At 11:15, my mother finally called. Unlike James, she left no voicemail. Just a missed call notification that somehow felt more accusatory than any angry message could have been. Around noon, I received an unexpected call from Robert Chin, CEO of Horizons Healthcare, our biggest new client. My finger hesitated over the screen before accepting. "Caitlin, I just heard the news," he said without preamble. "I've been trying to reach someone at Parker, but curiously, no one is returning my calls. I'd like to understand what this means for our contract." I chose my words carefully. "Mr. Chin, I'm no longer with Parker Enterprises as of last week. The campaign we designed for you is still valid and ready for implementation." "Last week?" He sounded surprised. "That's interesting. Because James Parker assured me just yesterday that you were still leading our account, just transitioning to a more strategic role." Direct quote. My stomach tightened. "I'm afraid that's not accurate. I was removed from the company rather abruptly." There was a long pause. "I see. Well, Caitlin, I signed with Parker Enterprises specifically because of your digital vision and your presentation. Our board was impressed with your understanding of healthcare marketing challenges. Without you at the helm." He left the sentence unfinished. "I understand your concern, Mr. Chin. While I can't advise you on your relationship with Parker, I would be happy to connect you with Michael Reynolds at Apex. Given the new ownership structure, he might have insights about how your campaign will be handled moving forward." By mid-afternoon, 3 other clients had reached out with similar concerns. I maintained professional neutrality in each conversation, neither disparaging Parker nor actively recruiting for Apex. But the damage was doing itself. These clients had signed on because of me, because of my vision, the very vision my family had rejected. At 4:15, I received a text from Sarah. "Emergency board meeting in progress. James looks like he might have a stroke. Eleanor hasn't said a word for the past hour. They're finally understanding what they've lost." I felt no satisfaction at their distress, only a hollow sadness that it had come to this. At 5:30, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw James pacing in the hallway, running his hands through his hair in the same agitated way our father used to when stressed. For a moment, the resemblance was so strong it made my breath catch. I didn't open the door. "Katie, I know you're in there," he called out, his voice cracking. "Please, we need to talk. This is our family legacy we're talking about. You can't just sell it to strangers." I remained silent, watching his distorted figure through the peephole. "Horizons is threatening to pull their contract," he continued, desperation evident in his tone. "Chin says he signed because of you. Central Bank and Midwest Foods are asking questions too. Do you understand what this means? The company could lose 40% of its projected annual revenue." The irony wasn't lost on me. 40%. The exact size of the ownership stake they had tried to undervalue and take from me. Eventually, James left, shoulders slumped in defeat. At 7:45 p.m., I received a call from Daniel Thompson, a family friend who had worked with my father for 20 years and now served as creative director at Parker. "Katie," he said softly when I answered, "I'm not calling to judge or to persuade you of anything. I just thought you should know that your brother, he's not handling this well. I found him in your father's old office, drinking scotch straight from the bottle, looking at old photos. He kept saying he never meant for it to go this far." I swallowed hard against the sudden tightness in my throat. What did he think would happen when they pushed me out of my own family's company? "I don't know," Daniel sighed. "I think perhaps he expected you to fight within the system, to argue and negotiate, not to make such a definitive countermove. You've always been smarter than he gave you credit for." There was a pause. "Your mother's not well either. This shock, on top of losing your father, it's a lot." The guilt I'd been holding at bay began seeping through my carefully constructed walls of righteousness. I had been wronged, yes, but my response had affected more than just James and my mother. There were employees who might face uncertainty, clients caught in the crossfire. "What happens now is up to them," I said finally. I did what I needed to do to protect myself after they betrayed me. The ball is in their court. After hanging up, I stood at my apartment window, looking out at the city lights. The phone in my hand buzzed with an incoming email, Michael Reynolds, with the subject line, "Next Steps." Caitlin, it read. In light of today's developments and the client responses we're seeing, I'd like to discuss a potential role for you at Apex. Your industry knowledge and client relationships are invaluable, and we'd be remiss not to explore how you might help shape our expanded capabilities. Are you available for breakfast tomorrow? For the first time since finding that envelope on my desk, I felt a flutter of something like hope. This wasn't the future I had envisioned, but perhaps it could still be a future worth building. My phone buzzed again, a text from my mother. The first direct communication from her since my termination. We need to talk. Family dinner. Tomorrow night. Please. Two paths stretched before me. I could move forward with Apex, turning my back on Parker Enterprises and my family completely. Or I could at least hear what they had to say, now that the power dynamic had shifted so dramatically. In business as in life. Timing isn't just about when you make a move, it's also about knowing when to listen. The next morning, I met Michael Reynolds at Westfields, an upscale restaurant overlooking the river. As we discussed potential roles for me at Apex, I found myself engaged yet strangely detached, as if watching the conversation from a distance. We'd like to create a new position, Michael explained, spreading a proposed organizational chart on the table. Chief Strategy Officer, reporting directly to me. You'd oversee the integration of Parker's traditional approaches with our digital framework, essentially becoming the bridge between the two companies. The offer was generous, $350,000 base salary. Performance bonuses, equity options, and a corner office in their downtown headquarters. Under normal circumstances, it would have been a dream opportunity, the perfect blend of creative freedom and executive authority. I'd like some time to consider it, I said, surprising both Michael and myself with my hesitation. Of course, he replied, though his expression revealed confusion. I thought you'd be eager to jump in, especially given the circumstances of your departure from Parker. I nodded, struggling to articulate the complex emotions swirling inside me. I am interested. It's just, there are some personal matters I need to resolve first. As I left the restaurant, my phone rang, Sarah calling with an update. Horizons officially put their contract on hold this morning, she reported. They're demanding a meeting with whoever is going to lead their campaign moving forward. James is in full panic mode. He's been calling all your former clients personally, trying to keep them from jumping ship. And my mother. Sarah hesitated. She's different. Quieter. She asked me yesterday if I thought you'd ever forgive them. The question caught me off guard. Forgiveness hadn't been part of my strategic calculations. That evening, I arrived at my mother's house precisely at 7. The familiar Tudor-style home where I'd grown up looked exactly as it always had, flower beds meticulously maintained, porch light casting a warm glow against the approaching dusk. For a moment, I could almost pretend nothing had changed, that I was simply arriving for our monthly family dinner. James's car was already in the driveway. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and rang the doorbell rather than using my key, a small but deliberate statement that I no longer considered myself an automatic insider here. My mother opened the door, her expression a complex mixture of relief, apprehension, and something else I couldn't quite identify. She looked older somehow, the events of the past weeks having etched new lines around her eyes. Caitlin, she said softly. Thank you for coming. The formality between us was painful. This woman who had once bandaged my scraped knees and celebrated my first business proposal now regarding me with the cautious air of a diplomat approaching a volatile negotiation. James sat at the dining room table, a tumbler of scotch gripped tightly in his hand. He looked up as I entered, his eyes bloodshot, his normally impeccable appearance disheveled. So, he said, his tone striving for casual but landing somewhere closer to bitter. The prodigal daughter returns. James, my mother warned, setting a plate before me. What? He challenged. Are we pretending this is just a normal family dinner? After what she did? After what I did? I repeated incredulously, my careful composure cracking. You conspired behind my back. Threw me out of my own company, tried to cheat me out of millions, and lied to my clients. And you're upset about what I did. We didn't conspire. Stop, my mother interrupted, her voice sharper than I'd heard it in years. Both of you. We're not here to assign blame. We're here to find a way forward. An uncomfortable silence fell as she served the meal, Dad's favorite pot roast. I noticed with a pang. We ate without speaking. The only sounds the clink of silverware against china and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, a sound that had been the backdrop to every significant family discussion throughout my childhood. Finally, my mother set down her fork. Caitlin, what James and I did was wrong. We acted out of fear and misplaced loyalty to what we thought was your father's vision. I let myself be convinced that the changes you wanted would dishonor his memory, when in reality, your father always embraced innovation. He would have been proud of your vision, not threatened by it. The simple acknowledgement, delivered without excuses or qualifications, took me by surprise. I had come prepared for denials, for attempts to shift blame, for emotional manipulation, not for straightforward accountability. 3 major clients have suspended their contracts pending leadership clarification, James added, staring into his scotch. Horizons, Central Bank, and Westfield Manufacturing. Together they represent almost 40% of our projected annual revenue. I know, I said quietly. Of course you know, he snapped. Then immediately closed his eyes, visibly reining in his temper. What you may not know is that we've had calls from 6 other clients asking specifically about your involvement in their future campaigns. Apparently. They signed with Parker Enterprises because of you, not because of our family name. There was a note of surprise in his voice, as if this revelation had forced him to reevaluate some fundamental assumption. We want to buy back your shares from Apex, my mother stated directly. We're prepared to offer double what they paid you. I nearly choked on my water. What? 18 million, James clarified. We can leverage the building and take loans against future earnings. Wilson thinks we can make it work financially, though it will be tight for several years. And then what? I asked. You buy back my shares and, what? Everything goes back to how it was. No, my mother said firmly. Nothing can go back to how it was. We've broken something precious, your trust. But we want to try to rebuild. We're proposing a new corporate structure. James would move to COO, focusing on operations where he excels. I would step back to an advisory board position. And you would become CEO with full creative control over the company's direction. The offer was stunning, everything I would have wanted before the betrayal. Yet something felt off, incomplete. Why? I asked. Why this complete reversal? Is it just because clients are leaving? Because you're losing money? James flinched, but my mother held my gaze. Partly. She admitted with characteristic honesty. The business realities have forced us to confront our mistakes. But it's more than that. Seeing what happened after you left, how quickly things began to unravel, how many people valued your vision specifically, it made us realize how wrong we were. Not just practically wrong, but morally wrong. James set down his glass, finally meeting my eyes directly. I've been jealous of you since we were kids, he said, the words seeming to physically pain him. Dad always looked at you like you hung the moon. Nothing I did ever measured up. When he left you 40% and put you in charge of creative direction, it confirmed everything I'd always feared, that he thought you were the worthy successor, not me. That's not true, I protested automatically. Dad valued you. Let me finish. He interrupted. My jealousy clouded everything. I convinced myself and Mom that your digital push was about taking over completely, erasing Dad's legacy, and, by extension, erasing me. I was wrong. You were right about where the industry is headed. You were right about what clients want. And Dad was right about you. He swallowed hard. You were always the one who understood his vision best. The raw honesty of his confession left me speechless. This wasn't a strategic negotiation. This was my brother finally confronting the insecurities that had driven him for decades. I've been seeing a therapist, he added quietly. Started last week, after everything. I should have done it years ago, after Dad died. My mother reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. We're not asking for an answer tonight. The situation with Apex complicates things, and you need time to think. But we want you to know that whatever you decide about the business, we want to repair our family. That's the most important thing, more important than any company. Tears pricked at my eyes. Surprising me, I had been so focused on the business betrayal that I'd compartmentalized the deeper wound, the fracturing of my family. Now, faced with their genuine remorse and vulnerability, those carefully constructed walls began to crumble. I have a breakfast meeting with Michael Reynolds tomorrow, I said, my voice unsteady. He's offering me a position as Chief Strategy Officer at Apex. James's face fell, but he nodded resignedly. That makes sense. It's a good opportunity. But I continued. I haven't accepted yet. I wanted to hear what you had to say first. Hope flickered in my mother's eyes. And now that you've heard it, I took a deep breath. I don't know if I can come back as CEO. Too much has happened. But I'm not ready to walk away completely either. What about a compromise? My mother suggested. What if you took a consulting role with Parker while you explore your options with Apex? It would give us all time to rebuild trust while ensuring our clients that you're still involved with their projects. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning, a path forward that acknowledged both the damage done and the possibility of healing. I think I could do that, I said slowly. With clear boundaries and expectations in writing, James nodded vigorously, relief evident in his expression. Absolutely. Whatever you need. As we continued talking, outlining potential arrangements and addressing practical concerns, I felt something shift within me. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but the first tentative steps toward it. The wound was still raw. The trust still fractured, but beneath the pain was the undeniable pull of family ties, of shared history, and the potential for a different future than the one I had imagined in my anger. By the time I left my mother's house that night, we had drafted the framework of an agreement. I would consult with Parker Enterprises on a contract basis, focusing specifically on the clients who had requested my involvement. I would be free to explore opportunities with Apex simultaneously. We would revisit the share ownership question in 6 months, after we had all had time to evaluate whether our new arrangement was sustainable. It wasn't the clean victory I had imagined when I signed the papers with Apex, nor was it the complete reconciliation my family might have hoped for. It was messy, complicated, and uncertain, but it was honest. And after weeks of betrayal and strategic maneuvering, honesty felt like solid ground beneath my feet. As I drove home under a canopy of stars, I found myself thinking of something my father used to say, in business and in life, Katie. The strongest bridges are built after the hardest storms. We had weathered a devastating storm, my family and I. Now came the difficult, delicate work of building something new from what remained. 1 year later, I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new office, watching autumn leaves dance across the courtyard below. The space perfectly captured the duality of my professional life. Located on the 14th floor of the Apex building, it offered a clear view of the Parker Family Enterprises headquarters 6 blocks away. Every day, I could literally see both worlds I now inhabited. My title at Apex, Executive Director of Integrated Marketing, reflected the unique bridge position Michael had created for me. Under my leadership, we had launched a new division specializing in helping traditional marketing agencies transition to digital-forward approaches. Ironically, The insights I had gained through my family's resistance to change now served as the foundation for helping other companies navigate similar transformations. 3 days a week, I worked at Apex. The other 2, I consulted at Parker, where significant changes had unfolded since our family reconciliation began. True to his word, James had stepped into the COO role, focusing on operations and administration, areas where his meticulous attention to detail and process-oriented mindset truly shined. Without the pressure to be the creative visionary, he had flourished, streamlining systems and improving profit margins beyond what anyone expected. You know what the funny thing is? He had said to me recently over coffee in what used to be Dad's office, now a shared conference room that neither of us claimed as personal territory. I'm actually happier now than when I was trying to run everything. I was drowning in responsibilities that never played to my strengths. My mother had embraced her advisory role with surprising enthusiasm, focusing particularly on mentoring junior staff members. The wisdom she had accumulated over decades in the business, combined with her natural nurturing instincts, made her an invaluable resource for young professionals finding their way in the industry. As for me, my consulting arrangement had evolved from damage control to genuine strategic partnership. I had never returned to Parker full-time, nor had I reclaimed my ownership stake. But my influence on the company's direction remained significant. The Caitlin Parker Innovation Fund, established with part of my Apex earnings, provided resources for Parker employees to pursue digital education and experimental campaigns. The business arrangements, complex as they were, had proven less challenging than rebuilding our personal relationships. Family dinners resumed, though now held monthly rather than weekly, and with an unspoken understanding that business discussions were limited to 30 minutes. We were learning, slowly and sometimes painfully, to relate to each other as people rather than business partners. Dad would be proud of you, my mother said during our most recent dinner, catching me off guard. Not just for your professional success, but for your forgiveness. That's his true legacy, not the company, but the values he tried to instill in both of you. Her words resonated deeply. In the aftermath of the betrayal and my countermove, I had been so focused on protecting my father's business legacy that I had nearly lost sight of his personal legacy, integrity, resilience, and the courage to forge new paths while honoring the foundations laid before. The journey toward forgiveness had not been linear. There were still moments when resentment flared unexpectedly, when a casual comment from James or my mother would reopen wounds I thought had healed. In those moments, I had learned to pause, to acknowledge the hurt rather than suppressing it, and to address it directly rather than allowing it to fester. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, my therapist had explained during one of our sessions. It's choosing to move forward without being controlled by the past. That distinction had been crucial in my healing process. I hadn't forgotten what happened, the betrayal, the letter, the attempted undervaluing of my shares. Those facts remained unchanged. But I had gradually stopped defining myself and my family relationships entirely through the lens of that betrayal. The most unexpected development had been the evolution of my relationship with James. The jealousy and competition that had characterized our interactions since childhood had given way to something resembling mutual respect. His continued therapy and my own emotional work had created space for more honest communication. I always thought I wanted to be Dad, he confided during a rare heart-to-heart conversation. But what I really wanted was for him to see me the way he saw you. I couldn't separate those two things until everything fell apart. The professional landscape had stabilized as well. After the initial shock of my departure and the Apex acquisition, Parker Family Enterprises had adapted to the new reality. The Horizons Healthcare campaign, implemented through our joint consulting arrangement, had won an industry award for innovative integration of traditional and digital approaches. Other clients had returned, reassured by my continued involvement and impressed by the company's evident evolution. My personal life had expanded beyond work in ways I hadn't anticipated. The financial security from the Apex deal had allowed me to establish a scholarship fund for young women pursuing marketing careers. I had reconnected with old friends neglected during years of single-minded focus on the family business. I had even begun dating again, something that had seemed impossibly frivolous during the height of the company crisis. As I gathered my belongings to head to dinner with my mother and brother, I paused to straighten the framed article on my wall, a profile in Marketing Weekly titled The Parker Pivot: How One Family Turned Business Crisis into Industry Innovation. The piece detailed our unusual arrangement, presenting it as a forward-thinking model for family business evolution rather than the messy, painful process it had actually been. The public narrative was neater than the reality, but I had made peace with that discrepancy. Business case studies rarely captured the 3 a.m. doubts, the tears shed in private, the complicated emotions that accompanied major transitions. What mattered was that we had found a way forward that honored both our professional capabilities and our family bonds. My phone buzzed with a text from James, running 5 minutes late. "Save me some breadsticks." I smiled at the casual normalcy of it. This was perhaps the greatest victory, not the professional arrangements or financial settlements, but the gradual return to ordinary family interactions, complete with minor annoyances and inside jokes. As I left the office, I passed the framed quote I had installed when I first moved in, words my father had often repeated during challenging times at the company. Success isn't measured by never falling down. It's measured by how you choose to get back up. We had all fallen down, my family and I. We had hurt each other in ways that once seemed unforgivable. But we had also found the courage to get back up, to rebuild not what was lost, but something new, something that perhaps better reflected who we truly were, individually and collectively. That, I had come to believe, was my father's true legacy. Not a marketing agency or a family business, but the resilience to transform setbacks into opportunities and the wisdom to value relationships above all else. In sharing my story today, I hope you found something valuable for your own journey, whether you're navigating family business challenges, recovering from betrayal, or simply trying to honor both tradition and innovation in your life. Remember that sometimes the biggest growth comes from our deepest wounds, and that forgiveness, while never easy, opens doors that resentment keeps firmly closed. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to unexpected growth? Or found yourself caught between honoring tradition and embracing necessary change? Share your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit subscribe and the notification bell so you don't miss my next video. And if you know someone struggling with family business dynamics or recovering from betrayal, consider sharing this with them. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these challenges makes all the difference. Thank you for listening, and remember, your story isn't defined by what happens to you, but by how you choose to write the next chapter.